Hi and welcome to day 12 of the Reiki 21-day challenge. My name is Becky Godfrey and I am a master practitioner and teacher in the UK. So for today's video, I had a different plan for today, but actually something came up and I realised it was really relevant that I talked about this. And the subject I want to cover today is self-care. Now, I was really tired last night, and so actually I went to bed really early. I went to bed probably about an hour and a half earlier than I would normally do, which meant I had an interesting night. I actually did a full sleep cycle and I slept for an hour and a half, and then I woke up at sort of about 10 to midnight. Couldn't sleep for an hour or so, and then eventually fell back to sleep and woke up at quite late for me, and I woke up at 8. And then as my day progressed today, I got to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and actually I was just really, really tired. Now, my backstory is I had chronic fatigue, or ME, as it's sometimes also known. And so when I was in my teens, I would do a lot of sport, but actually I was finding I was falling asleep during the day. And then when I went to university at age 19, I actually gave up a lot of my sport, and I still found that I was sleeping through my lectures, and I was just tired all the time. So part of the reason that I got into complementary medicine, holistic medicine, alternative health, whatever you want to call it, was because of my own journey with chronic fatigue and ME. And what I learned from my own journey is that you can't burn the candle at both ends. Now, as a young kid, I was really active. I did a lot of sport, as I said. I was really involved with school activities. I did music. I tried reasonably hard academically. And my day would look like something like getting up at 6 o'clock to go swim training before school. Then I'd have a full day of school. Then I'd come home. I'd probably do a bit of homework, a bit of music practice, eat my dinner. Fall into bed absolutely exhausted, 10 o'clock at night. And then I would get up at 6 o'clock and do the whole thing all over again. Now, I didn't know about the concept of lie-ins. I grew up with horses, so you always have to take care of them, you always have to be up for them. But I also grew up in a family where we didn't really do downtime. We didn't do relaxation time. It's very go, go, go. And so subsequently, the concept of just sitting down on an afternoon, maybe to watch a film, was really alien to me. So I spent much of my 20s undoing a lot of the conditioning I'd received in my sort of teens and early years, because that was what was necessary for me to recover from having chronic fatigue and to let go of the stress that was in my body. And by the time I came to Reiki, which I was about age 31, when I came to learning about Reiki, I'd already tried lots of different health approaches. First of all, I went to my doctor and spoke to them about it, and they kind of shrugged their shoulders. They didn't really know what to do. And after a few years of that happening, I had an older sister that was studying psychology, and she said, well, do you think there might be a psychological reason for your tiredness? So I went back to the doctor and said, well, do you think there's a psychological reason? So they sent me to psychiatrists, they did an assessment, and they sent me along to have some form of talking therapy, which I didn't really connect with. And it was because it was my third year at university. By the time I had done a couple of sessions, it was actually time to come home. I graduated. There was no chance of me getting a job. I wasn't able to support myself. I wasn't able to work. I was really lucky that I actually was able to do enough to get my degree. So I had no choice but to come home. And back here in rural Sussex, there weren't the same sort of services there were in a big city. So the only option they could give me was just regular counselling. And at the time, I felt that didn't really help. So I pursued an alternative path. I started off with acupuncture. There was a local herbal store near to me, and I dropped in, started a conversation with the person behind the desk. And he gave me some herbs to try. And whilst whilst I appreciated the sentiment, they didn't actually make much of a difference. But what did make a difference to me is when I was in there and I was talking to them, they said, you will get over this. You'll get over your chronic fatigue. And that was the first time in the 3 years that I'd actually been actively looking to get over my chronic fatigue that I'd heard those words. So I was pretty excited. So when the herbs didn't work, I was so impressed with the way they'd spoken to me. I actually went back and had an acupuncture session. And unfortunately, I thought I would probably bounce back within 6 weeks. I'm sure everyone wants to recover from a serious and chronic illness really quickly. But really what it took me was a good period of time to recover from my ME. Another thing that I tried was chiropractic care. I have a family member that had got into chiropractic and my family had started to go. And this wasn't because I had a back problem. This is actually because the chiropractor was really good at doing education, and they talked about the nervous system and stress on the nervous system. And they assessed me to see whether my nervous system was stressed, and they showed a lot of stress around the liver area and digestive. And so I literally invested the last amount of money that I had in signing up for a 12-week care package with them. And that actually made a huge difference to me. But actually it was really interesting because I had quite a strong healing reaction to it. So when I first started my care, I went from being reasonably functioning, and I did have a part-time job that I worked with horses 4 or 5 days a week, to actually being so exhausted that just to eat my lunch would make me very, very tired. And I managed to spend a little bit of my time with my horse every day, and then perhaps hang out with my boyfriend, and that was pretty much all I could do. However, that investment paid off, and within 3 months I was starting to improve, and I was able to work part-time again. So I continued with, I was still having acupuncture at this point. I continued with my chiropractic care. And the next thing that I did after a couple of years was looked into nutrition. I went to see a nutritionist and we talked about diet. I'd already eliminated dairy, wheat and sugar from my diet. So it was more about looking about the sorts of things that would support my system and give it the nutrition and nourishment that I needed. And then actually, after a few years of doing that and sort of investing myself financially quite heavily in it, and emotionally and personally quite heavily in it, I actually got really bored that I wasn't making much progress. And so I was like, oh, I'm just going to give it all up and live a normal life. And actually, funny enough, improved probably the most I had in the 4 or 5 years prior. It wasn't until much later that I actually ended up in a job that I really didn't like, and ended up going to see working with a career coach, and she started to ask some really good questions. And some of the questions she asked me made me realize that actually I had this natural healing desire, something that I'd wanted to do from a very, very young age, was to heal people with love. And I'd actually been quite obsessed with it as a child. Doctors and nurses was my favorite game. And I would visualize and imagine the people that I loved, just loving them back to wellness and back to health. And she made me realize that actually some of my top values in life were spirituality. So out of my conversations with her, and partly influenced by the fact that she was a Reiki practitioner herself, I decided this was something that I wanted to train in. So I did that. I trained doing some therapeutic and personal development work with horses, and I also trained in a technique called the mind detox technique. And what was really interesting to me is when I started to do my own personal inner work, I continued to improve. So by the time I was doing this, I considered myself to be free of ME. But actually, in having to do the work to work with others, I started to realize the importance of just having a complete health package. What was even more interesting is by the time I started to work with clients, I suddenly started to see behavioral patterns in them that were very much how I used to behave. And actually, I started to appreciate how much I'd changed. So one of the things I did before I had ME and when I had ME is I would just carry on regardless. So even if I was very ill, and actually my blood test showed that I'd had Epstein-Barr at some point, and I have no recollection of actually having that virus. Now, there was many times, probably 2-3 times a year as a kid at school, that I would get severe tonsillitis. But I would just go to school anyway. I wouldn't take any time off. I was also a swimmer, and I had quite a heavy swimming schedule. And again, it would be incredibly rare that I wouldn't go swim training. What's different now is if I'm tired, I rest. And if I need to take time out, then I do. And that was a big journey for me. That was a big journey to let go of the need to please others, to fit in with others, and actually start to listen to my body first. I also discovered through playing around with nutrition is that actually if I was really astute and I really listened to my body, I knew what I needed. So I went from having multivitamins every day and things that I needed to top me up to actually doing the emotional work, particularly some mind detox work that I did, actually enabled my digestion to improve so much that I didn't feel like I needed to take a multivitamin every day. And so now actually I very rarely take anything like that. I have a good diet. I proactively have a good diet. And I will just occasionally take something if I feel like I need a top up. The reason I'm sharing all this is because I notice in modern day society there can be a lot of pressure to perform. And I see it a lot in the workplace, but I see it in society generally, this idea that we need to just soldier on, keep going, we mustn't look weak, and it's very, very selfish to put ourselves first. Well, I can only talk from my own experience and say I have run the experiment. I've run the experiment about trying to please others, and I've run the experiment about doing what other people tell me to do, and for me, it didn't work. So now, by choice, I'm self-employed. I pick work that I love, that inspires me, that lifts me up. And actually, it's fascinating to see that when you're really on path, you're really on track, and when you really do what you love, actually money naturally flows to you. I also picked work, particularly that knowing that I had a background of chronic fatigue, which meant that actually if I needed to take a nap during the day, I could. And so this afternoon, when I was tired, and I was feeling a little overwhelmed, if I'm honest, with the amount and volume of work that I had to do, I made a very, very quick judgment call. Do I just rest now and feel better later, or do I soldier on? Well, do you know, when I checked in with my body, it became really, really clear. Rest now. And I intended to just rest for an hour, and I did rest for an hour. I probably had a snooze for about 40 minutes. I probably spent about 20 minutes meditating, and then I spent the next probably 30 minutes, I would say, just doing some light tasks, checking emails, looking at social media, and then after that, actually, I felt well enough. And what happened next is the really powerful bit. What happened next was I did have a lot to do, but I got it done probably in half the time. I was much more focused. I was really like, done. And I actually clocked off much earlier than I was expecting. And I really wanted to share that with you because following Stephen Covey, one of his 7 habits of highly effective people is sharpen the saw. Now, I've run that experiment too, and I can promise you it really works. When we take time out and we actually prioritize our needs, we're much more effective for the rest of the day. So if you were finding that you were struggling with your 21-day practice, you were struggling to find time to commit to it, I want you today to run that experiment. I want you to actually make a commitment and then notice how different you are afterwards. And I'm pretty confident that if you take time to stop, rest, organize yourself, give your body the attention it deserves, listen to what it needs food-wise, making sure it's well hydrated, giving it the rest that it asks for, and genuinely making a commitment to live a life that fits your body rather than making your body fit your life, then I'm really confident that you'll find you experience much more harmony, much more energy, and you'll actually ultimately get more done. So not the topic that I plan to talk to you about today, but a really important topic, and one that was very, very relevant to my experiences. So I'd love to hear your comments in the comments box below. I'm pretty sure there's quite a few of you that will have some stories, and this content will resonate. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you on future days. Okay, bye for now.